Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Kouryer Podcast. Today's guest, we have Mr. Ballard, Jordan Ballard. He's a graphic designer from Seattle, Washington, and he has a lot of experience with logo design and graphic design and basically merch design and product design in general. But with that being said, would you please give us a brief introduction to our audience in case I missed out on anything, Mr. Ballard?
Yeah, sure. I guess my first start is I guess I've been a graphic designer for about close to 20 years now, working mainly with logos, product design, and apparel graphics is pretty much my three contenders for graphic design. 37 years old, live south of Seattle, so that's pretty good.
Right, we're good. The next question is, would you please give us a little introduction on how you got into graphic design? In the beginning.
This was it was like a happy accident is what I always kind of like to call it. I went ahead and my initial goal was to be a 3D animator for video games, working on creatures, worlds, landscapes, all that type of stuff for kind of your darker genres of video games. I wanted to go into like the Resident Evil, the horror genre, stuff like that, and potentially concept artists for movies. So I went to a digital arts college north of Seattle and went ahead and got a full BA in 3D animation. And 3 months before graduating, I had went on a kind of a photo shoot with some semi-pro wakeboarders around the area and to help a local brand with their catalog. And I was up late one night and one of the, we were all just kind of partying after the photo shoot and one of the wakeboarders came downstairs and had seen me sketching. I was one of the last people still up and it was probably like 2 or 3 in the morning. And he said, "Can I see your sketchbook?" And I said, sure. So as he was flipping through my sketchbook, he was just like, "Do you want a job designing wakeboards?" And at that point, at 18, I think it was like 19 years old, something along those lines, I was just like, yeah, I was like, absolutely. So I was like, where do I sign? So that was kind of it. When I graduated college, I had already met a wakeboard company and was slotted to design for them. So I got my start in graphic. I just went immediately right into product and graphic design for wakeboards. And within a year and a half, I switched to another wakeboard brand and had a longer stay there. But that's kind of how my start kind of happened. It was, kind of an accident, but I always knew I wanted to do graphic design, but halfway through college, at least, someone said, "Hey, few of the professors pulled me aside and were like, we think you kind of got this." They're like, you're already showing strong signs, but we think you should maybe focus on something else just so you really get like a grasp on something else. And I said, sure. So I kind of went towards 3D animation, but here we are today, 18, 20 years later, and still doing graphic design. So that's,
yeah. So basically, from the get-go that you wanted to become a designer and an artist as a job and profession. It wasn't like, because most artists usually start from another field, then they switch back to design, and they're kind of tiptoeing between them. Then sometimes they get their big break and they start to fully go on design as a job.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, exactly. I knew I needed to do something utilizing my creative ability, and I didn't pin it exactly, but growing up skateboarding and snowboarding, I knew that was one option. And, as design careers unfold, people can find themselves in a lot of different avenues, designing trade show booths to, gift cards for Hallmark to snowboards and I don't know. Yeah, absolutely. All product and print materials for Amazon. You just never know where it'll end up. So, it's interesting. Definitely an interesting field.
Yeah, exactly. And the next question is, what is your main branch of design that you're focusing on? And tell us about your experience from the start that you started until now. I'm not just talking about the graphic design necessarily. I'm talking about the specific designs you do. For example, do you mostly do graphic designs? Logo designs or merch design? Could you explain to our audience that?
Yeah, well, it's still actually a huge question and almost like it's been a double-edged sword for me for a while, is what is my direct focus, as there's been a good two things that have been kind of taking the forefront. And I would say logo design and apparel graphics have been a huge apparel and product graphics, I should say. So, but mainly dealing with clothing. So as much as I'd like to say I have a straight focus, it's weird because there's a lot of projects that also include illustration that keep coming my way when it comes to the freelance world. So there's kind of, I guess, three that are kind of my main focus. But what jobs keep hitting me would be, I'd say, logo design has been the forefront, with, I guess, a really close second place of product graphics for the apparel industry. I'd always been interested, like, in the very simplistic type of logos, even though my work kind of, I love to do just heaps of detail. But it's definitely there's something that I enjoy about making something so simple that you can't really strip too much away from it. So so that's where the logos come in, and it's fun. It's great to solve. It's kind of like a really crazy puzzle sometimes. When you're working with like a monogram or a company that has a sort of direction. It's just great to make that solve, to be able to put the last piece of the puzzle in, and it looks crisp and clean. And so, I guess I hope that helped answer a little bit. Like I said, I'm still kind of trying to find a lot of designers, will have logos and that's their only thing they do. Or somebody will do hand lettering and they just crush it at it. And I'm kind of like, there's just a multitude of things that I do. So, but that's the top three, I'd say.
That was a really perfect answer, to be honest. Thanks.
Yeah.
For our next question is, speaking of freelancing, you said, are you a freelancer, full-time freelancer right now, or are you working in a particular studio right now? Give us your thoughts on both being a freelancer and working for a company, if you have any experience in that. Yeah. And by the way, sorry, just to top off the question, which websites do you usually work in for freelancing?
For freelancing right now, I do have a full-time gig. Right now I'm working for Tommy Bahama, which is a men's clothing tropical brand for the most part, for those of you who don't know it. And that's up here in Seattle, ironically. I thought it was in Florida or something like that when I got the call from them, but it is here in Seattle. And I do freelancing on the side. So I'm not full-time freelance, but I do freelance as much as I can without getting burnt out, because that's the ongoing battle, is trying to find time between your day-to-day life, just projects you need to do, and of course family, all that stuff like that. So, but I love it. And the goal would be to go more or less full freelance. That would be it. But I have had a lot of experience working for brands and companies, so I can touch base with that and then kind of segue into the freelance game if you want.
Yeah, of course. If you could tell us a bit more about your experience as a freelancer, that would be actually really interesting to know.
Well, let's start there. Yeah. I mean, the freelance, as I'm not full time, I take as much projects as I can get. But my main avenues, I'd say Instagram, a little bit of behance.com, another portfolio website. And I mean, with most of my freelance, it's ironic. A lot of it, I'd say 70% comes word of mouth. And it's usually somebody that I used to know, have crossed paths with, either via like a company or just somebody I met on the bus or something like that, right? And they'll hit me up and they have a friend of a friend who has a startup company, or a brand that they're trying to work with, or a rebrand, and that's usually most of my clients. The rest of the 30% comes from those sites, usually Instagram, Behance, tiny bit of Dribble with 3 B's out there for those of you who don't know it, and yeah, I'd say that's it. Yeah.
All right, cool. And speaking of designing right now, like let's say you right now, I'm a client of yours, right? And I ask you, and I want to hire you for a commission of a logo, all right? How does your design process usually go anytime you want to start working on a design project? I'm not just talking about a brand identity project, just a full-blown brand identity project. I mean, just a simple, for example, a t-shirt design or a logo design, just the design process. How do you mentally prepare that so we can go through with it?
Usually I like to get a little bit of kind of like just a chat on the phone, kind of how we're doing more or less right now, about the company, how long they've been in business. I like to get a lot of details about the brand or company, seeing, it kind of gives me an idea of how you can charge. Maybe just talking to somebody, you can also get a good grasp of the person's process or thinking. If the project sounds interesting, I'll move forward and start talking to them about, the details. If they have a direction, any sort of info that they envision with the task at hand. If I don't like the project, I usually will pass it on to another designer, and I'll just say, hey, I don't think this will be a good fit. Or, just maybe I'm too busy at the time, and I'll pass off to another friend, another designer that might be able to handle it. Exactly. Faster, quicker if I'm too busy at the time. But if the project goes through, basically just have them give me any descriptive details that they can about their business, about what they envision the logo or the brand to be, what their target audience is. And if they're interested from then, I give them a quote, and usually kind of tack in a sort of a concepting fee, so that even if I spend time concepting, I'll still get, money right off the bat. Wrap up, I'll usually have, depending on the client, I'll have half up front and then half upon completion. And we can get into details on that too if you want. But yeah, sometimes that is it works out well. Sometimes if it's a return client, and like for instance, there's one that I worked with for Filson, I'll just get on the project and they're good for it time and time again. So once you build a relationship, you kind of know how they work, and they can be pretty reliable. But with newer clients, I will definitely have usually an upfront 50%, and go from there, really. From that, I get the description, and I will usually, very rarely will I try to give, as I call it, rough designs, but some sort of rough vectored or detailed hand sketch of a few items and a few different concepts, and see where it goes. And hopefully one of those grabs their attention, and I take it to fully execute the rest of the design and the rest of the branding, or the icon that they want, and that's it. So I try to do a couple steps to where I'm not just fully finishing it right off the bat, unless I know the client, I know the direction. Sometimes people will give me ultimate control and say, hey, you just create. So, which is always nice. That's what every designer would love, but sometimes it's not that easy. So
exactly.
Yeah. But either way, try to make it fun. Try to, take on projects that you would, that I want, and most of the time, I guess in the last 5-6 years, it's been coming my way. So I usually like 90% of what I'm doing. So, cause that's a huge part, if your heart's not in it, or if you're just not really wanting to do X, Y, or Z, then pass it on, make somebody else's day amazing. So, somebody who needs clients or something.
Yes,
So,
of course.
spread the wealth is what I like to say, to other designers and looking for portfolio projects and stuff. So, is there anything else you'd like to dive in deeper on that one?
Yes, actually, if you could tell us about how, for example, if someone wants to start freelancing, and basically, it's probably a common problem among designers in freelancing. They have a problem when the person that's asking them for a commission to do a work for them, it's kind of tricky and kind of icky in the pricing section with some people, but they don't understand the value of a work of an artist. For example, if someone says you did that in 5 minutes, but why are you charging, for example, $500 for a logo? Or they expect the guy to, for example, to work for 5 days. They kind of measure it like that. It's kind of basic. And what's your tips on how to deal with these people when you get clients like that?
Yeah.
Aside from the fact that, of course, you can always not accept their offer, but I mean, in general, some tips and advice on how to deal with just, this type of situations.
Yeah, no worries. That's definitely the trickiest thing, and I will say this is that I do vary prices. I don't have when I get a lot. What do you charge for a logo? And a lot of those come from Instagram, and it's a tough one, because there is no set flat price. I mean, in my head, I like to have a base of where I start, and work up from there. But it doesn't necessarily fit. Like for instance, a relative or something like that, a mom's friend. Sometimes, I will not charge them as much as somebody like if Adidas hit me up or, Callaway Golf or something like that. Yeah, I just don't. So yeah, it's definitely based on the value. How valuable is it to that brand, And a lot of the times it's, yeah, I mean, it's feeling out the company. There's been a couple times where, I can give you one where I shot myself in the foot where the guy had, it's asking also the biggest thing is asking someone's budget, just straight up like, hey, what is your desired budget for this project? And, yeah, it's just, you get various answers. The freelance game is really weird. I would say also your portfolio, your experience, all aids to you figuring out your value. And that's different for everyone. But it's, yeah, I guess I can start with like one process where like, you can shoot yourself in the foot by not asking too many questions. So, I got to talking to this one client and he had been, eluding at the very end of the conversation after the whole creative process was kind of dialed. He talks about all this, side business is just absolutely thriving and, how much money he made per month and all this stuff. And I was just like, whoa, like that could have been I had already kind of, dove down the route of a price. And at the very end, I was just like thinking, wow, after he told me all his other side businesses and all this stuff and how successful, I was like, that logo is probably, could have been worth a lot more to him. So, by just diving in and not asking the right questions about a company's history, how much they make, maybe gross revenue, stuff like that, because I will definitely, like I said before, won't charge the local, lawnmower company who's just started, as much as I would Adidas or, some tech firm or something like that, so asking the right questions is huge. I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we had one more question in there.
All right. Sure.
Yeah, you had one more after that. You said dive into more about the process or the pricing, or you wanted to go into like how clients talk about. I know what it was. You said when people say, whether it takes 5 minutes or, why that takes so quick. Why do they have to charge so much?
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's a good one. The big thing that I always say to that is, it's taken me about, 18 years of experience and the schooling to be able to do that fast. I go, so, you can take I charge because it's of the value it is to the company. And I have a flat rate. I basically just, can't do logos for $200 anymore. You know what I mean? It's just, there's so many of them out there that will do that. And, if my skills I perceive are better, then, I should be at a certain rate, at least higher than, in my head that I've kind of have. But yeah, people say that a lot. I've got that a few times where it's like, oh, that only took you, half an hour. Why should I be charging you, X, Y, and Z? And I just said, yeah, that's just my rate. I said, I stick to it, and that's more or less it. Yeah, it's taken me, like I said, 18 years to be able to have the experience to just knock something out that fast. You can take I don't know, any sort of job, and you can say, like, let's just say a person who builds decks or houses, and somebody and his team could crank it so much faster than others. But, I'm not going to tell if they put the house up in 2 days, and that's fine. I'm still paying them the amount. You know what I mean? I got my end desired result. So as long as I deliver that result, that's no question, really. And a lot of the times I don't get it, but there is a few, like, oh, that'll only take you 30 minutes. Like, oh, I'm not going to pay you that much. And those clients you just don't deal with. You know what I mean? I had one guy that kind of said something along the lines where it's like, oh, this will only take you like half an hour, right? And it's like, no, people don't necessarily know how long it's going to take them. So they always assume, and that's the clients you really don't want to work with. So asking the right questions is huge. Getting to know that person's personality, and if they're not respecting the craft or they don't respect your time that you've put in, then I always pass it off. So
Yeah, that's probably the best decision to do.
Yeah.
So, all right. The next question is, what do you think you have? What do you think about this statement? You have to be good at drawing to be good at graphic design. And here's the thing: I've seen a lot of graphic designer that they're not necessarily good at drawing, and I see a lot of great artists who aren't necessarily good at graphic design at all. How do you usually try to explain the gap in between them? Like, do you have to be good at really drawing and be a sketch like an architect to be able to good at graphic design, or do you just need some basic understanding of the shapes? I'm asking this for our audience who's listening to this because some people, they just started drawing and they want to transition to graphic design, and that's their whole goal in the end, but they're not hopeful that they will make it because they're not good at drawing. You get where I'm going with this, right?
My answer to that is absolutely no. You do not need to know how to draw to be a graphic designer at all. I know actually a few right now that graphic designers that I feel are very good at their craft, but they can't draw very well, and they're exceptional designers. And I think for people who, you got to really know the route you want to go down, because I incorporate a lot of my illustration work into my graphic design. So if that's, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. To design a logo, you can still utilize the tools that Illustrator, Photoshop, and, Procreate, stuff like that provide, and craft stuff totally fine. And, but what I will say is that if you do know how to draw, it is highly, highly valuable when it comes to the conceptual phase and providing a quick, crisp, detailed, kind of basically just like a visual of your ideation process. And so it really helps out huge in all that. So I guess Tommy Bahama, the company that I'm at now, the wakeboard companies that I've been in, it's been huge in providing ideas to sales reps or art directors or clients over the phone, to where I don't spend that much time on something, but yet they can grasp the entire idea via like a sketch, like a really detailed sketch. So, it's been I will say that. So it helps immensely, but not necessary, I guess, in my total answer. So there we go.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah. So the next question is, we're actually getting to the final questions right now. And the next question is, any tips for a good resume for a designer? Should they go make their portfolio on LinkedIn, on Behance, on Instagram? Which one is the best? Or should they make on both three platforms? And to follow up with that is, how to get this works after you make the resume noticed by big companies?
Okay. I guess the answer to that, there's multiple avenues, and I think the biggest thing is by having. I mean, you can go about it a whole bunch of different ways. These days, Behance isn't the end all be all, but it's a great platform and very easy to use without having to like code or get a base theme out there. I would say, if you have the time, and that's the biggest thing that I hear about designers talking about is just having the design to be able to put yourself in multiple facets of the portfolio world out there, whether that be Kouryer, Dribbble, you can get on sites your own, just, whatever that is. And if you have the time, I say it's highly valuable, because it's kind of like a lottery ticket. Not everybody that goes on Behance will know about Dribbble. Not everybody on Dribbble will know about LinkedIn, and you can keep going down the rabbit hole. But if you have the time, I would utilize cross platforms and as well as your own site. It's huge. And the biggest thing, focusing on presentation. I mean, I'm in the middle of revamping website for a while, so I'm kind of saving up portfolio projects now. But yeah, I'd say multiple avenues if you can. But if not, have a good, strong backbone in one, and that be either your own .com, .net, whatever that be, your own domain, or Behance is pretty good, and Instagram's good. It's just yeah, it's a job in itself. that's for sure. So it's like a part-time gig in itself, but it is a great way to get your work seen by a lot. So Instagram is works well, but not as professional, I would say, as having something like Behance or your own domain. And then getting it known. As for your second part of the question, getting it known. I mean, I'm still working on that. It's crazy. Consistency, I guess. It depends on the platform, and the only one that I know, Behance wise, there might be certain times a day, that you can post or something like that to get stuff seen, but just make sure that your thumbnails are pretty engaging. Make sure that the quality of work is you're doing your best stuff for the most part. Some can be explorations as well, but I would say keep your presentations really nice, all your products shot really well, or at least displayed in beautiful mock-ups. And there's nothing wrong with that these days at all, as those look just amazing. So if a designer does even just a business card, go find a mock-up and just throw it in there. It looks great. It conveys the idea, shows where your headspace is at, your process, and it looks nice. So just make sure, again, all your projects are displayed nice, shot well, or in good mock-ups, and that should help immensely in just like being viewed, and your value for sure goes up in that case. With the other platform, Instagram, now that's a whole different game on getting your stuff viewed. That is all about consistency these days, and with the algorithm changing, it's tougher. It's tougher if you didn't have a audience before, as now you have to do a multitude of stuff. I mean, they want you to do video. They want you to do posting, not only once a day, but maybe twice a day. And then doing that for months on end so that the algorithm catches that and says, oh, this user is consistent. It's valuable for Instagram to keep, so they'll throw you at the top of the feed on the Explore page, and then bam. And it might happen again and again. And then it might not happen for a while. But yeah, earlier in the game on Instagram was a lot easier, but these days it's crazy. So that's the only tips I got on IG, is being consistent if you want your work shown, and just quality images. And I guess the other thing that I've been learning is, you commenting back, being sincere, going out and spreading love. You get love back. It's kind of like, just what's the word? You throw out good vibes, you'll get karma. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, lack of better word. There we go. But yeah, it's a weird one. As for Dribble's pretty professional. I like that a lot, even though I'm not even, I like it a lot. I haven't even spent the time to use it that much, and I need to. But it's a good one to attract professional clients there as well. So I'd say if you have gotten an invite from Dribble or you're currently on it, utilize that one. I would say that should be a top one. Instagram should be for, if you're serious about it, it can work, but it's definitely, it's a hard one. You got to stay consistent. So yeah, that's kind of how
all right. So it's basically because the growth on Instagram is not organic anymore. It's changed. The algorithm has changed completely, and it's not the same as like a couple of years ago. That's kind of, that's right. And the next question is, what are you working on right now that you can tell us? What project is it? And of course, I understand if you're working on a project for a client or a company, you can't talk about it that much. That's fine. But I mean, just, is it a merch design? Is it just tell us a bit about what you're doing right
Yeah,
now.
right now I've got a logo for a kind of a digital marketing agency, and that's the number one thing I'm working on right now. And I have a character illustration for a sort of a marijuana accessory brand or company, and it'd be so basically like a illustrative character. So there's again here. So here's where my project diversification kind of comes in. And so yeah, illustration, a logo, and I think there might be a wakeboard coming down the line. There's been talk of that, and still chatting with Filson. They're supposed to get back to me here soon. As they kind of they've been pretty consistent throwing me projects, so that's been it's a good outlet. But yeah, that's the two things I'm working on right now. Other than that, I'm definitely saving a lot of portfolio projects out right now, trying to I've had this weird issue with a whole bunch of drives, so I'm trying to consolidate all my work onto one drive, and that's a long process in itself. But yeah, that's the two freelance projects I have aside my daytime gig. So
Nice,
yeah.
nice. And the last question is, what area beside that you're working on right now? For example, you're right now currently a graphic designer and artist, basically. All right. Now, let's say you didn't want to continue grow in that path. You were done with that. What area would you be interested to explore and learn in the future? Is it animation? Is it 3D modeling? What's other thing you want to learn later if you got time?
UX and UI is one that's been definitely kind of poking at me for a while. I've been it's been on my mind for a long time. So I think if I venture out into any other creative outlet aside graphic design, illustration, and direction, I would say it would be UX and UI for sure. Yeah,
Interesting.
and more because it gets me into I don't necessarily want to design websites or anything like that, but it does. I like to make I don't want to work necessarily on the back end stuff, but I think it's a huge thing that it could at least lead me down that path, and it'd be a nice soft entry into into that whole space. So I continually see just heaps of jobs for UX, UI, and it can go a lot of different places. With everything, digital is just reigning supreme right now. Again, it's another job where you can work remote. It's another job you can still use your graphic design skills in many different facets, from apps to buttons and icon systems. Like, I love designing icon systems and stuff, and so yeah, down the road, that's the next step, I think.
Yeah. All right, interesting. So now we come to the end of this section. Now, with the next section of the podcast is the favorite section after the major questions we asked the guest. In this section, it's kind of like a break time, just a break for both the guests and the viewers. It's basically just really normal short questions about different favorite things that they prefer between two different subjects. Like, for example, not necessarily that, just the favorites of, for example, a designer. I'm going to start and you'll understand where I'm going with this. What is your favorite piece of outfit or just accessory to design?
Like outfit, you're saying to like clothing? Say that one more time.
Yes. What is your favorite thing to design? This is what I'm saying. Or outfitting. What piece of outfit? Like, it's shoes, it is t-shirts, it is,
prints. I like designing prints. So like the print, or some people would say pattern, on the inside of a jacket or outside of a jacket. I like doing textile prints. So that's probably one of my favorites at this point. I love doing, I've just done a ton of t-shirt graphics and stuff, hat patches, stuff like that. So I'm kind of, not that I'm like worn out or anything on it, but patterns and textile prints are just a blast, and they can be utilized in subtle ways. They can be just blasted all over the front of a garment. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So that's been the favorite lately.
All right. And what is your favorite go-to design software?
Usually gosh, I bounce back and forth between Photoshop and Illustrator. But if I had to pick, I don't know. I mean, I love doing stuff in vector. Illustrator is probably my go-to. I would say Photoshop in a close second. Yeah, it just depends.
All right.
If I'm doing the illustrating or the logos, but yeah, very comfortable with Illustrator.
Yeah, Illustrator, of course, vector. And who is your favorite artist?
That's a tough one. I have a ton of people who inspire me heavily, and I could kind of run through a few of those. When it comes to logo design, a guy named George Bukoa out of Georgia, over kind of on the west side of Russia area. Let's see, JPEG Fletcher out of Carolinas. I think he's in South Carolina. He's incredibly talented, and both the last guys I mentioned do highly, highly simple stuff, but yet crazy effective. And it's kind of like there's one quote where it's like about good design, and these guys really emulate that quote. And I might butcher this a little bit, but it was like, great design is not really in how much more you can add, but how little you can how little you can strip it down and still be effective. And I butchered that quote, but yeah, these guys are just very simplistic. I love those two logo designers. Illustrators. Holy cow. Not to mention the greats too, Saul Bass and some of those guys. I mean, they're all amazing in themselves. They're legends. But illustrators out there, God, there's so many of them. I don't know. I guess let's just leave it at the logo designs. Those are like huge aspirations for me. So, yeah.
All right, we can move to the next question. And who's your favorite? It's now this is kind of becoming, this question is becoming a bit miscellaneous. But who is your favorite YouTuber?
Shoot. Gosh, I don't know. I mean, in all honesty, I don't YouTuber. Gosh, I don't really watch. I mean, I guess if I watch vids, I'm watching car stuff or I don't know. YouTube. I don't know. That'd be something to ask my kid. He'd have a favorite YouTuber. I said, like, right, for sure. But
any particular artist on YouTube?
No, I can't remember the kid's name. There's a kid out of Houston that I was watching some of his Procreate tutorials. I wish I knew his name for this cast. I can't recall it off the top of my head. God, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm drawing a blank. I can't recall his name.
Yeah. It's fine. And the last one is, which social media are you the most active on?
Probably Instagram at the point. Yeah. Instagram, I'd say. I rarely get on Facebook. It's like maybe it seems like twice a year. I was just following up with last year's birthday comments. So I mean, that shows you how often I get on Facebook. But Instagram's probably number one. I need to get back. My goal would be to get back on Dribble heavy. So yeah. Cool.
Sounds interesting. And we've come to the final section of the podcast, which is the timeline section. With all that being said and done, to conclude all we discussed, give us a roadmap for someone who is zero in graphic design and wants to get to the place you are in terms of skill set. Like, for example, where to start, what are some of the best go-to tools, softwares, preferred books, courses, anything. Like, give us a roadmap for someone who's zero and wants to follow the path you went.
The biggest thing I'd say is number one, I mean, these days, school, I've been asked these questions sometimes via parents that have like called into some of my work and asked for the art department. And I know parents don't like to hear this and won't want to hear it, but schooling these days, if you want to be a graphic designer, you don't necessarily need to go to college. And here I am as one who went to college, but I think those are some of the old ways. So I will say that first and foremost and I know it's going to rattle some of the cages from those parents out there, but you just need to know, if you're not going to go to school, you need to make sure that you are a human that is driven and you can put in the time to craft a portfolio that is up to par of the people you want to be, I would say. So don't as a new designer, don't let those good guys, girls out there stress you out. Use it more as a stepping stone and say, this is where I'd like to be. You can emulate them, but just don't straight rip them off. But utilize, anything from color palettes or the way they solve stuff. Look at the way they, craft a monogram if you're wanting to do a logo, or if you're looking at an Illustrator or something like that, just really be able to dissect their work and to the bare bones, and to be able to reconstruct it, to in your own style. People who want to be a designer, I would say you need to know Illustrator, and you need to know Photoshop is amazing as well, depending on what type of design you want to go into. Those are the two you need to know. These days, though, highly, highly, highly recommend it. Procreate. It is an iPad-based program for those who don't know out there. This has been cutting my time in nearly half when it comes to the illustrating side. It is so damn fast. And what I mean by that, I guess I have to explain a little bit more on that. The old way.
If you want to go deep into that, you can. Just feel free to.
Illustrator. So if you want to do like back in the day, it makes me sound dated. Doing an illustration, my process would go like this. It would be a blue pencil. I don't know. I use these just because it's easy on the eyes. The scanner doesn't pick it up. And when you overlay an ink sheet, it'll go away. But I start with a blue pencil, do a rough sketch, get it to where pretty polished sketch, I should say, overlay vellum, some sort of clear tracing paper, tape it. Then I would use microns and I would go and ink it, right? With little to no room for error. A buddy of mine taught me a trick one time with a razor blade. With if you use thicker vellum, you can go ahead and use a razor blade and to get rid of your mistakes, right? To a degree, like if you messed up on an eyeball, you can kind of scrape away the ink. But you can only do that like once. But you have to be very, very meticulous and spot on. Nowadays, with Procreate, I will just snap that little quick sketch with my phone, airdrop it right into the iPad, and you can almost like resketch it, ink it right there. It eliminates all the time of scanning, digitally cleaning up. It's insane. It's cut my illustration stuff in half. So highly recommend that for any illustrators out there who want to incorporate their stuff into graphic design. It's just insane, as opposed to like I know this one time I did a bandana for Filson, and it took me, I think it was like eight hours of just straight raw vectoring, like a crazy paisley sort of print for like this bandana. And now that I think about it, I could have done it in probably half the time, at least half the time, using Procreate, and doing it in just a section. So that's a big one. Another one for the designers starting out, I think and this is going to be tough for people, but I know everybody's mom will say you're good, and everybody's, cousins and friends, oh, that's good. But go out there and there are some designers that are introverts out there, but that's another thing. Be willing to get critiqued. Go to someone who is good, put your stuff out there, take criticism. I've had my work, oh, that's shit, or, oh, that's, can you swear in this? Whatever. Anyway. Okay.
It's fine.
Yeah. Anyway.
Don't worry, it's fine.
Yeah. It's, you're going to get told your work's shit. You're going to get told your work's awesome. But the best thing is going out to a really credible designer or professor or something in some way or shape or form, getting your work critiqued. Know where you set in the pack. That way, when you go to apply for jobs, you aren't, and you keep getting shut down, maybe why. It's like, make sure you know your caliber of work. Portfolio is everything these days. And I want to go back to the whole school thing. So just, school isn't necessarily everything. But having a raw portfolio speaks volume. And I've known many creative directors, art directors who never went to school and are self-taught. And if I could go back and knew that I was going to go down the graphic design route and not 3D animation, I would definitely have just self-taught myself and started building a portfolio right away. Another valuable tool for people either in school or that don't go to school, this is a good one for anyone. A guy named Chris Doe out there, out of Santa Monica. He runs a agency called The Future. The guy, another guy, Michael Jonda, are two guys out there that I wish I would have figured out it during like early in my years, because these guys are the knowledge that they share about client interaction, pricing, stuff like that are the stuff that they don't teach you necessarily in design school. So I would highly recommend following those guys, and they will teach you. There's a lot of good advice from them on the stuff they don't teach you at school. So that's another valuable couple mentors. If people are on the more introverted side, you can just watch some videos. Of course, these days, YouTube, if Procreate's somewhat new, but it's thriving right now. And if you need any tutorials, I would just go on YouTube and just dive right in. I mean, that's the beauty of today. And everything's available right there, as we all know. I'm trying to think of anything else, tips I would give some new designers, though. Let's see.
And not just necessarily new designers, people who are just interested to become a designer, not even amateur designers, people who are not even dip their toes, as they say, in the world of design. Any tips that could even help the beginners?
It doesn't hurt. I mean, when you start now, I guess I can kind of tie this in with illustration. I mean, it's okay at the beginning to emulate someone just to get the feel of how they craft their logos or how they draw something. I mean, when I grew up, I originally wanted to design or, draw for like Street Fighter characters and kind of monsters and stuff like that. So, when I was in my younger days, I would straight up draw your Ninja Turtles or, Street Fighter characters or something like that. And it does, it gets you pretty good quick. I should say that. Anybody who wants to get into the illustrating side, take a figure drawing class. I know when I went into my figure drawing classes, I was able to draw pretty well, but what was amazing was to see a few people who had never really drawn before in their lives, and to see them at the beginning of the class and the end. I will say figure drawing is a heavy dose of just drawing talent. I saw people come in that couldn't draw hardly at all. And by the end of the class, probably, I think the class is a good quarter or so long, but they were doing damn well. I mean, for the end of it. And I don't know, it's just learning basic shapes and lighting and all that. So dive in fully, take a drawing class. Again, it's all practice though. So, it's just time, but, figure drawing helps with illustration for sure. I would highly recommend it. With illustration. Yeah.
Yeah. Staying consistent with the practice.
For sure. I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah.
All right. I guess that's about it. Thanks for Mr. Ballard. Thanks for joining us on this episode of podcast. And how can people contact you if they wanted to ask you any questions, or where they can follow you on social media?
You can hit me up on Instagram if you want, anytime. Jordan Ballard Art. So, and on there is linked to my Behance portfolio, which, and feel free to drop me a line, whatever. And any questions anybody has, feel free. Young designers, new designers, whatever, doesn't matter. So,
by the way, guys, that's Jordan Ballard with 2 L's. I'll link the ID in the caption of the post. Don't worry, guys. That's a wrap. Thank you for your time, Mr. Ballard, and
you too.
take care,
Thank
people.
you.
Have a good day.